welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessikah with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. My guest today is the author of The Nursery, which is a very short book with a lot of stuff that happens within the pages. So without any further ado, I'm going to allow her or invite her to introduce herself and tell us about The Nursery.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Szilvia Molnar. The Nursery is about a young woman who is finding it hard to leave her apartment after giving birth. She's normally a translator who enjoys the solitude, both the work and going to the library or a coffee shop or staying in her apartment. And doing her work, but this experience kind of makes her question her identity all over again, and she starts to befriend an upstairs neighbor who is coming down to complain about the baby crying, and so they develop a friendship of sorts, and time is kind of running out for both of them. Where her husband would like for her to re-enter the world and join her in the outside of this apartment. So that's the main plot of the story.
I like very much the voice of the story. You know, the mother, just the way that first of all, she talks about the baby, she calls her Button, which I thought was very cute. So it's like you have this really sweet nickname for a baby. But then at the other side of it, she's very open about how isolating and demanding Button is. As you mentioned, like she's a translator, and I actually have a sister-in-law who's a translator, so I have a little bit of insight.
Cool.
Yeah, I have a little bit of insight into how that works. My sister-in-law is child-free by choice. Although one time she was like, well, like if I ever, down the road feel differently, I do work from home. And I'm like, honey, no, it doesn't work that way. I'm like, you can't work and have the big, I'm sure there are people who can, and like more power to those people. But if your job is to really be home and focus on work, the routines of a young baby and a young child and the demands that are put on you, that's its own work. That's its own job. And that's all encompassing and very, very difficult. And you really capture just that sharp feeling of concern. Is this child going to, this child, I love this child, but this child is just taking. What's this going to do with my relationship with my husband? Like, I can't relate to him the same way. Or my partner, I can't relate to them the same way. Am I ever going to feel like leaving this place? And it was just so claustrophobic and so well done. And there's other things I want to talk about too, but I'm going to let you kind of take it from there for a bit.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you saw those aspects because that was certainly my intention. I was very much intrigued by the idea of Button as also this, not just the taker, but the fact that the protagonist still has this big new responsibility of keeping Button alive, and it's very hard to do in a relationship where you're not getting anything back, which is what happens in this very early stages of motherhood, and it's almost even, I was curious to play with the notion of motherhood at that time because it, on a physical and mental level, it requires so much of the person. And so even the title of mother, I think, is so expansive, but where does it really begin? Does it begin at pregnancy, or does it begin right when they put the baby on your chest? And if so, is that fully fair to say when, the infant is not really giving much back?
For sure. And I think like, like people say, everybody wants to tell you, first of all, what you're supposed to do and when you're a mother. Like, and some people will tell you, oh, you're a mother when, again, like when your baby is on your chest, and someone will be like, oh, when you first feel that first flutter. Like everybody has an opinion. And I wonder how many people who have these opinions, like have been told these opinions themselves, because I think that it's very harmful, especially for a new parent, to have like, I should feel this way. This is how it should be. And then it's not. And so I thought that that was very interesting because you did that very well. And just like the whole relationship between the mother and John, her husband, was also written really nicely because, people don't ask fathers the same things that they ask mothers. People don't put the same expectations on fathers, in a heteronormative marriage, parenthood. They don't put the same expectations on a father that they would on the mother. It's, like, oh, you come home and you kiss the wife and the child on the head. There was something with that I don't want to talk about because I really, really liked it in the story, and I feel like the readers kind of need to experience that particular scenario. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about specifically. But like it's just not the same. And I love my husband, but when I myself came home with my twins, I remember our first day home, like he took that Monday off, okay? And he was like, a 3-day weekend. And I looked at him and I was like, are you kidding? Newborn twins, 3-day weekends don't exist for quite a long time. So, like it was just like the dynamics between everything, and just how, she talked a little bit about her work and the types of translations she did, how she related to her husband, how she related to the neighbor. It just really, like, you really felt like you were in that apartment with the mother and Button, experiencing everything in real time.
Yeah, well, I was very curious also to, the reason why I also chose to have the book set during, it's maybe like 7 days, maybe like 10 days, like the first 10 days of our protagonist coming home and being in the apartment, is, wanting to unravel the hours, the minutes, the seconds, because it was so interesting to me that, right at the minute and the second after giving birth, suddenly you are not everything that you've been up until that point. So whether you were a translator or CEO of a big company or a school teacher or working in the grocery store, if you have this experience of giving birth, then everything that comes after that is completely different. And it can be, I think, quite a big of a trauma and struggle to grapple with that change in identity, and how do you welcome this new person into your life who you don't even know and they don't know you, and then to navigate your intimate relationship to your husband in this new, triangle. I just was very fascinated by.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I do want to ask you, so first of all, where did the whole novel come from for you? When did this really begin to sort of pop in your mind and you started to write it down?
So I first actually started taking notes when I was pregnant with my first child, but I wasn't quite sure of, what it would lead to. But the whole experience was so alien-like to me, and just the physicalities of your body changing, and rearranging to give space to a new person, I was really intrigued by, and also intrigued by that kind of romanticism that you have in the beginning, of the pregnancy or throughout. And so I just first started taking notes, and then it developed into this kind of before and after section, where you have the before sections are our protagonist going through pregnancy, and then the after is her being confined to her apartment. And actually, a very first draft was having these two parts very separate from each other. But then my agent suggested that I merge them together, and so I started braiding them together. And so it almost like works as this kind of spiral that also has a few flash forwards to you seeing that there is a kind of happy ending, a kind of sort of uplifting section, or at least like that we're giving our protagonist her choices back to her.
I love that you actually just put it that way, because again, and this is me projecting a little bit. I was one and done. I had my two, and then I was like, not doing that again. Twin pregnancies are rough, but not everybody has like that really nice glossy magazine pregnancy, or even early few days that they tell you that you're going to have. But I really liked that you just said choices, because it is an acknowledgement, and you do read this very much in the story, that your choices are hindered when you're caring for a baby. You don't have the ability to just get up and do whatever. You can't just like spontaneously go to the library, and even if you do with the baby, you're at mercy for, is the baby hungry? Is the baby going to need to be changed? Is the baby just going to start screaming? And it does take your choices away. That's not saying the result of motherhood or having a child is a bad thing. It's just not really something that people consider. And I think a lot of women are shocked when they realize it. And
For sure.
It's really cathartic reading it in book form, because I think a lot of people have to talk about this. And I did really, like feel the whole braiding technique. I liked it that way. I liked that you kind of felt like you were on that roller coaster with her, but you could sort of see you could see the horizon where you kind of get off and you're just like, whew, man, that's a ride. Did you find it difficult to use the braiding technique when you were writing?
It was incredibly hard. Yes, I have to admit, it was a very good advice in terms of having that format, but it was I'm not exaggerating that it was sort of like 50 drafts in. I kind of understood that this is working and it makes sense. And going back to your comment about choices, I think that also speaks to very much about the discussion of depression in the book, whether it is our protagonist or her neighbor coming down who's mourning the death of his wife. I think that's also a sort of fascinating, if painful, aspect of depression, where if you're in the midst of it, you often feel you don't have any choices at all, and it's only sometimes that you have to be reliant on time passing, that maybe a window, a sort of glimmer of hope will shine through, whether it's through a person who will see you, in your darkest moments, or you manage to somehow pick yourself up, kind of wash your face and try again. But I think that's what the kind of brutal aspect of any kind of depression is, that you feel like you have lost all of your choices, and I think it was only fair to, even as like for a reader um, to to give people hope, because it can be a little too much to not, to write a book without that feels a little unfair, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. Did you talk to any other first-time moms while you were writing this?
Yeah, for sure, plenty. I mean, I was very fortunate to meet new mothers, also because I was going through the experience for the first time. And I think looking back on it, what I would also say that can be helpful, is to not just like connect with new mothers, but also to connect with mothers who are older, have more experience, because um, again, like with time, I think you have a better sense of sort of how to put certain dark moments into perspective. And it's almost as if I think like mothers who have done it for some time can also be really good role models and support for women who are just now going through it.
Before we close out, I want to talk about the cover because it is brilliant and it is very like stealthily brilliant. Because at first, when I first got the book, I was like, "What am I looking at?" And then I kind of focused and I was like, "Ah, now I see where you're going with this." Did you have any input in that?
Yes. So the designer at Pantheon Books, Linda Huang, she's absolutely amazing, and she sent over about 7 suggestions, which was very generous. Many, if not most of them, were very boob chest heavy, which I thought was hilarious.
It
And
it
this one,
works though. It works.
yes, yeah. And so I've accepted that I have a breast on my cover. It's a very beautiful one, and I like the play around, that it can be abstract and kind of both seductive and playful, and having a novel drip out of the nipple is also, I thought, was incredibly clever. So it's all the designer's credit there.
Yeah, I thought that it was great. And also just the fact that it is kind of blurry and like newborn's eyes are not focused at that time. It's
Oh,
almost like
sure, yeah.
it's like you are Button. You are
Right.
the child. I loved it. It was so clever.
Yeah, no, that's a really sweet observation. It's true.
So are you working on anything after this?
I'm working on something new. Just kind of taking notes. I mean, the nursery is publishing very soon, and so kind of just still in the middle of talking about that, and hoping that people will feel excitement for it.
I think they will. Well, once again, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing such a raw book with us. And I hope people read it too. I think that like I'm so happy to see more books like this coming out because it is almost like when you're talking about like talking to an older mother who's been through it. It's almost like doing that. It's like, one other thing I actually wanted to mention is the obsessive Googling that you put into the book. That was something I wanted to circle back to. You got that so right, like how you're there, you have this kid, and then you have this phone with supposedly the entirety of knowledge. I'm
Mhm.
saying this as a librarian, you can look up and you just start obsessively Googling these random things that are probably not healthy for you to be Googling. You like, wow, you nailed that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to also, break it up a little bit in terms of, some of the difficult passages that might be, quite dark or heavy to bear. I wanted to break it up in this format, and also kind of show that the protagonist is trying to sort of reach out to the world, maybe not in the healthiest way by doing this, but also sort of instinctively in the kind of modern days that we live in, that it's natural for us to turn to our phones first instead of a person. And so yeah, I just thought that was like a format I wanted to play around with a bit too.
Well, again, thank you so much. This was great. I love talking to
Thank
you.
you. Thanks so much.
Yes, so once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was
Szilvia Molnar.
author of The Nursery. And when does that publish?
It's publishing March 21st.
So that's right around the corner, and it will be on shelves by the time this airs. So thank you so much, Szilvia. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.